Let me ask you something we rarely stop to ask ourselves. Why do we actually get bothered? Not just annoyed, but genuinely disturbed, disrupted, knocked off balance. Think about it. Someone cuts us off in traffic and we stew for the next 30 minutes. A colleague sends a passive-aggressive email and it sits in our head all day like background noise we can't shut off. A friend doesn't reply to a message and somehow that turns into a question about our worth. Why does any of this shake us the way it does? It's not about the action, it's not about the traffic, it's not about the email, it's not about the delay in the reply. It's about something deeper. The things that bother us the most are rarely about the present moment. They are about what the moment triggers inside us. Insecurities, fears, expectations, and a subtle but powerful belief that the world is supposed to revolve around our sense of order. We get bothered because we're afraid of what something might mean. We interpret moments as threats. Not always physical threats, but threats to our identity, to our ego, to our sense of control. That's what it really comes down to, control. We like the feeling of being in control. When something violates our expectations, it triggers something ancient in us. Survival mode. And in survival mode, everything becomes personal. We perceive threat everywhere. But the truth is, most of these threats aren't real. They're mental constructions. They're stories we tell ourselves. When someone criticizes your idea in a meeting, you don't just hear their words, you hear a threat to your value. When someone forgets to include you in an email thread, you don't just see a clerical error, you feel invisible, disrespected. And when someone rolls their eyes at your opinion, you don't just see immaturity, you feel rejection. The brain is brilliant at finding patterns, but it's also really good at misreading signals when emotions are involved. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. We often get bothered by things that hit a nerve we haven't dealt with. That's why two people can go through the exact same situation and one walks away unshaken while the other carries it for days. It's not about what happened, it's about what we brought into that moment. If we're carrying unresolved frustration, if we're walking around needing validation, if we're secretly afraid that we're not enough, it doesn't take much to knock us down. And it's not because we're weak, it's because we haven't done the work to understand why we get triggered in the first place. You see, getting unbothered is not about being emotionless. It's not about turning cold or detached. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about self-leadership. It's about becoming curious instead of reactive. Instead of asking, how dare they do that to me? We start asking, why did that hit me so hard? That one question, why did that bother me? Can change everything. When we stop to ask why, we give ourselves the gift of perspective. We begin to separate what actually happened from what we felt happen. There's a gap there. And in that gap is where we can grow. In that gap is where we can start choosing how to show up instead of letting our emotions run the show. Let's be honest, none of us are perfect at this. We've all reacted in ways we regret. We've all replayed conversations in our heads wishing we'd said less or more or nothing at all. But training ourselves to get unbothered doesn't mean we never feel things. It means we learn to feel without falling apart. We learn to acknowledge the emotion without becoming the emotion. This kind of inner work requires honesty. It asks us to look inward. And that can be uncomfortable. Because sometimes the reason we got bothered is that our pride got bruised. Sometimes it's because we were seeking approval and didn't get it. Sometimes it's because we haven't fully accepted ourselves yet. So the tiniest sign of rejection feels like confirmation of our worst fears. But here's the good news. Once we know why we get bothered, we can begin to change the story. We can shift from being reactive to being reflective. We can start catching ourselves in those moments, not with judgment, but with awareness. And that awareness is powerful because it gives us the ability to interrupt the cycle. Instead of spiraling into anger, anxiety, or blame, we pause, we breathe. We choose. There's a quiet strength in the person who doesn't flinch when provoked, not because they're suppressing their emotions, but because they've done the inner work to understand them. There's wisdom in the leader who doesn't take everything personally. There's calm in the individual who understands that not every battle needs to be fought, and that sometimes peace is more powerful than proving a point. This doesn't mean we tolerate disrespect. It doesn't mean we stop caring. It means we stop letting every little thing steal our peace. We train ourselves to stay anchored even when the waves come. And that kind of presence, it's rare. It's magnetic. It's what separates the ones who lead with strength from the ones who are always trying to prove theirs. So when we talk about training ourselves to get unbothered, we're not just talking about a mindset shift. We're talking about a character shift. We're not talking about avoiding emotions. We're talking about mastering them. Because the truth is, the most powerful people in the room are not the loudest. They are the most grounded. They are the ones who understand why they feel what they feel and who choose not to be ruled by it. The question isn't whether life will test you. It will. The question is whether you'll allow every test to dictate who you become. And that starts by asking the deeper question, not just what happened, but why it shook you. Because once you know the why, you can start rewriting the how. That's the first step in training yourself to get unbothered. It's not the loudest step, but it's the one that changes everything. There's a moment just before we react where we make a decision, whether we realize it or not. Someone says something we don't like, a post online rubs us the wrong way, a look, a tone, a delay in response. It doesn't take much, and in that brief moment, we have a choice to respond with intention or to react with emotion. Most of us don't even realize we're making a choice at all. We just react, and then we move on, unaware that something deeper just happened. Every reaction has a cost. Every time we respond with frustration, with anger, with sarcasm, with defensiveness, every time we let someone else's energy dictate our own, we're paying a price. It might not feel like much in the moment, but over time, those moments stack up. And what they cost us is bigger than we think. We lose clarity, we lose peace, we lose time, but more than anything, we lose influence. Because no one is inspired by someone who's always on edge. No one is drawn to someone who flinches at every comment, who needs to win every argument, who takes everything personally. Reactivity doesn't just drain us, it weakens our leadership. We live in a world that's constantly poking us. Notifications, opinions, criticism, comparison. It's all there, all the time. And the pressure to respond, to speak up, to clap back, to defend ourselves, it's almost relentless. But just because the world is loud doesn't mean we have to be. Just because someone provokes us doesn't mean we have to give them a piece of our peace. Think about the last time you overreacted to something small. Maybe it was a misunderstanding with a colleague. Maybe it was something your partner said in passing. Maybe it was a text that didn't come fast enough. Whatever it was, your heart started racing, your thoughts spiraled. Maybe you raised your voice, sent a message you regret, or shut down completely. And then later, minutes, hours, maybe even days, you looked back and thought, why did I let that get to me? That's the cost I'm talking about, not just emotional, strategic, human, relational. Reactivity creates chaos. It makes us unpredictable. People start to walk on eggshells around us. They withhold feedback because they're afraid of our response. They avoid difficult conversations. And without realizing it, we build a reputation, not as someone who's strong, but as someone who's fragile. That's not who we want to be. We think reactivity makes us powerful, that it shows we're passionate, that we care. But it doesn't. What it actually reveals is a lack of discipline, a lack of control. Because anyone can react. That's easy. The real strength is in the pause, in the breath, in the ability to say, I'm not going to let this pull me out of alignment. We're not robots. We're not aiming for emotional suppression. What we're aiming for is emotional regulation. And the difference matters. Suppression is avoidance. Regulation is awareness. It's knowing what you feel and still choosing your behavior. It's having the self-awareness to say, I'm feeling angry, without letting that anger become the driver of your decisions. There's something incredibly powerful about someone who stays calm under pressure. Not because they don't feel, but because they've trained themselves to lead themselves first, to put presence before pride, to put purpose before ego, because that's what's really at stake in moments of reactivity, our purpose. Every time we snap, we step away from who we're trying to become. Every time we retaliate, we reinforce an identity we're trying to outgrow. And it's not just about how we feel, it's about what we're building. Relationships, teams, reputations, they're built on trust. And trust isn't formed in the big moments, it's built in the quiet ones. In how we treat people when things don't go our way, in how we respond when someone disagrees, in how we handle pressure, frustration, disappointment. When we get reactive, we stop listening, we stop connecting. We go into defense mode. And defense mode is the enemy of growth. It keeps us stuck, it makes us resistant to feedback, it blinds us to nuance, and eventually it burns bridges we never meant to burn. But here's the truth that no one wants to admit. Sometimes we like being reactive. We like the feeling of righteous anger. We like the illusion of control. We like the emotional release. But that short-term hit comes with a long-term cost. Because while it may feel good to put someone in their place, it rarely moves us closer to the life or the leader we want to be. So we have to ask ourselves, is it worth it? Is the emotional venting worth the relationship strain? Is the clever comeback worth the trust it erodes? Is the impulsive decision worth the peace it steals? There's a reason the most effective leaders, the most grounded people, the ones we admire, they're not reactive. They're not easily shaken. They don't let every opinion become a battle. They've learned something most of us are still figuring out, that reactivity is expensive and peace is priceless. When we begin to see the cost of our reactivity, something shifts. We start to value stillness. We start to appreciate restraint. We begin to realize that strength isn't in the reaction, it's in the response. In the choice to protect your energy, in the maturity to let some things go, in the wisdom to know when silence is the loudest statement. We train for this not because we want to be passive, but because we want to be powerful in a different way. A grounded way, a sustainable way. We train for this because leadership, real leadership, requires emotional discipline. And emotional discipline begins with understanding that your peace is your responsibility. No one can steal your peace unless you hand it to them. No moment can shake you unless you let it. And no comment, no email, no look, no mistake, none of it has the power to define you unless you react. So the next time you feel that surge of emotion, that spike of defensiveness, that itch to respond, pause just for a second and ask yourself, is this reaction worth the cost? Because when you know what your peace is worth, you stop giving it away for free. Have you ever said something in the heat of the moment and immediately regretted it? Maybe it was during an argument with someone you care about. Maybe it happened in a meeting when you felt cornered. Maybe it was online, replying to a comment you knew you should have just ignored. We've all been there. That split second where emotion takes over and logic takes a back seat, you react. And then later you look back and think, why did I say that? There's a reason that moment feels so familiar. It's because reacting is our default setting. It's fast, automatic, emotionally charged. It doesn't require reflection. It doesn't wait for facts. It just happens. It's the body's way of defending itself, of preserving ego, of protecting identity. But while it might feel natural, it's not always useful. Reacting is what we do when we're not grounded. It's what we do when we feel threatened by someone's tone, someone's opinion, someone's silence. The reaction isn't always loud. Sometimes it's shutting down. Sometimes it's passive aggressiveness. Sometimes it's withdrawal. But it always comes from the same place, a desire to protect the self. Now, let's compare that to responding. Responding is intentional, it's calm, it's thoughtful. It creates space between what happened and what you choose to do next. Responding isn't about control, it's about awareness. It's about recognizing your emotions without letting them run the show. And that's space. The one between stimulus and response is where your power lives. The people we admire most, leaders, mentors, role models, they don't react to every little thing. They pause, they breathe, they take a step back, and then they choose how to respond in a way that aligns with who they are, not just how they feel. That's what makes them trustworthy. It's not perfection, it's consistency. Reactivity is unpredictable. One moment calm, the next explosive. people start to feel like they're walking through a minefield. But someone who responds consistently and calmly, they create safety. And safety builds trust. Whether it's in a relationship, a family, or a team, trust is built when people know they won't be punished for being human. That's what responding offers. Stability. Let me tell you something you already know deep down. Reacting feels good for a second. It gives you the illusion of power. You feel like you've won. You had the last word. You showed them. But real power doesn't come from putting someone in their place. It comes from keeping your peace while staying in yours. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, you're rewiring your brain. You're strengthening the muscle of self-control. You're reinforcing the identity of someone who is anchored, not tossed around by emotion or ego. That's not weakness. That's maturity. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes practice, repetition, intention. We don't practice this because life gets easier. We practice it because life doesn't. People will still disappoint you, misunderstand you, push your buttons. But when you learn to respond, you stop giving other people power over your state of mind. You stop letting every opinion become a crisis. You stop letting bad moments turn into bad days. Here's the key. It's not about suppressing your emotion. It's about stewarding them. Your anger, your frustration, your sadness, they're not bad. They're signals. They tell you something matters. They point to values, to needs, to boundaries. But when those emotions are unmanaged, they become destructive. They damage relationships, reputations, even our own self-worth. A response, on the other hand, uses those emotions as data, not direction. Responding means you've done the work to know yourself. You've asked the hard questions. What usually triggers me? What do I need when I feel threatened? What beliefs do I have that make me feel unsafe when they're challenged? Those are not easy questions, but when you answer them, you become better equipped to pause, to interpret, to choose a better path. There's a story about a young executive who blew up in a board meeting because he felt dismissed. And he stormed out, thinking he was standing up for himself. Later, his mentor pulled him aside and said, "You had every right to feel what you felt. But when you react without thinking, you let someone else write your story." That stuck with him. Because that's exactly what reactivity does. It hands your pen to someone else. But when you respond, you stay the author. You stay grounded in your purpose, not your pride. And that matters more than we realize. Pride wants to win the moment. Purpose wants to win the long game. This is especially important for people in leadership. Whether you lead a company, a classroom, a family, or just yourself. If the people around you don't know which version of you they're going to get today, they will hesitate to be honest with you. They will censor themselves. And when people stop being honest with you, you stop growing. Responding then isn't just emotional discipline. It's a leadership strategy. People will test you, not because they want to destroy you, but because they're human. They're reacting too. So when you respond, instead of mirror their behavior, you interrupt the pattern, you change the energy of the room. And that ripple effect, calm in the face of chaos, clarity in the face of confusion, that's what leadership looks like. So the next time something triggers you, try this. Don't respond right away. Buy yourself time, count to 5. Breathe. Ask yourself, what's actually happening here? What would the best version of me do right now? That pause might feel small, but it's the doorway to a different future. One where you don't have to apologize for how you handled things. One where you act in alignment with who you are. Reacting is easy. Anyone can do it. Responding is the work of someone who is training themselves to rise above the noise. Someone who isn't here to win arguments, but to build trust. Someone who values peace over ego. That's not passive. That's powerful. And the most powerful people you know, the ones who move rooms without raising their voice, who command respect without demanding it, they're the ones who've mastered the art of the pause. They don't let everything get to them. They listen more than they speak. And when they do speak, you listen. Because it's clear they've thought about it. So yes, you could react, you could fire back, you could storm out. But every time you respond instead, you're building something stronger. Your character, your reputation, your relationships. And that is worth far more than winning a moment you'll forget tomorrow. Respond, don't react. Your future self will thank you. There's a quiet kind of peace that comes when we finally understand what's ours to carry and what isn't. That moment when you realize not every burden is yours, not every opinion is your business, not every problem is your responsibility to fix. It's the moment when you finally let go of what you can't control and decide to pour your energy into what you can. Most of us live with the illusion that control equals security. That if we can just plan better, work harder, anticipate faster, say the right thing, show up the right way, then everything will go the way we want it to. But life doesn't play by those rules. Life is unpredictable. People are unpredictable. And control, more often than not, is just an illusion we use to cope with our fear of uncertainty. The truth is, we don't control how people see us. We don't control how they speak to us. We don't control how they react to what we do. We don't control the market or the traffic or the weather or the timing of opportunities. And yet we pour so much of our energy into those things. We obsess, we overthink, we try to manipulate outcomes. And all it does is leave us exhausted, anxious, and often disappointed. Because control is not the same as influence. Control is about force. Influence is about presence. One is rigid, the other is fluid. One demands, the other invites. And when you shift your mindset from needing control to learning to influence, first yourself, then others, you begin to live with a different kind of freedom. Detachment isn't about not caring, it's about caring wisely. It's about recognizing that your energy is finite, your attention is valuable, and your peace is worth protecting. Detachment says, I can still show up fully without clinging to the outcome. I can still do my best without measuring my worth by how others receive it. I can still care deeply without caring what isn't mine. It's one of the hardest things to learn because it runs against our instinct. We want to hold on. We want to fix things. We want to control the narrative. But that grip, tight, anxious, rigid, it doesn't bring us peace. It robs us of it. It makes us reactive, frustrated, tense. It pulls us into battles we don't need to fight. And worse, it distracts us from the battles that do need our full attention, like the ones inside ourselves. Think about how much time we lose trying to get people to understand us, trying to prove a point, trying to get someone to change, and then think about how little control we actually have over those things. No matter how clearly you speak, people will still misunderstand you. No matter how hard you work, some things won't happen on your timeline. No matter how good your intentions, someone will still criticize you. So what if you stopped spending energy trying to manage what's out there and started focusing on managing what's in here? Your attitude, your effort, your tone, your integrity, your resilience. These are the things you can control. And when you consistently take responsibility for those, the rest becomes noise. You stop needing people to validate you because you've already decided you're enough. You stop needing circumstances to be perfect because you've trained yourself to show up anyway. You stop being tossed around by every external force because your internal compass is finally steady. Letting go of control doesn't mean letting go of standards. It means letting go of the outcome. It means being excellent without being obsessed. It means preparing but not panicking. It means being committed but not consumed. It means trusting the process even when you don't get to see the full picture. There's an old saying, you can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. Life is the wind. It's unpredictable, unfair, and often outside your preference. But how you position your mind, how you show up in the storm, that's your sail. That's the part that's yours. One of the most powerful things you can do is simply ask yourself in any moment of stress or chaos, is this mine to control? If the answer is no, then your job isn't to fix it, it's to face it with grace. Maybe that's patience, maybe that's boundaries, maybe that's silence, maybe that's walking away. Not everything requires your involvement, not every fire needs your water, and not every opinion deserves a response. When you stop reacting to things that are outside your control, you start responding to life in ways that align with your values. You conserve energy. You gain clarity. And you make room for what actually matters. The world is noisy. People will project their pain. They'll misjudge your silence. They'll challenge your calm. But that doesn't mean you need to observe it. You can learn to observe it without becoming it. That's not cold. That's not distant. When someone speaks to you with disrespect, you don't have to match their tone. When life delays something you were hoping for, you don't have to spiral into doubt. When someone chooses to walk away, you don't have to beg them to stay. You can let things go without losing yourself in the process. Because that's what this is really about. It's not about apathy, it's about identity. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need the world to be quiet in order to find stillness. Someone who doesn't need everything to go their way in order to feel grounded. Someone who's done chasing control and has finally found peace and presence. That's where real confidence comes from. Not in knowing everything will go according to plan, but in knowing you'll still be okay even if it doesn't. That's what makes someone unbothered, not numb, not disconnected, but anchored. So the next time you're faced with something frustrating, whether it's a person, a delay, a failure, pause. Ask yourself, what part of this can I actually control? If there's something you can do, do it. But if not, practice letting go with grace. Because peace isn't something you find when everything goes right. Peace is something you build one boundary, one pause, one choice at a time. And the people who seem the calmest, they're not lucky, they're not indifferent. They've simply stopped wasting their power on things that aren't theirs. They've trained themselves to release what they can't control and focus instead on how they show up with integrity, with presence, and with peace. And that kind of person, the one who walks through chaos without absorbing it, is someone the world can follow, someone worth becoming. Let me ask you something. If someone walked into your home every day, shouted insults, trashed your furniture, and drained your energy, would you keep letting them in? Of course not. You'd change the locks, you'd set boundaries, you'd protect your space. But somehow, when it comes to our mental and emotional peace, we're a lot more generous with the doors we leave open. Peace, true internal peace, isn't just the absence of chaos, it's the presence of clarity, purpose, and self-respect. And yet, we often treat it like it's optional, something we get around to once everything else is done. Once the inbox is empty, once everyone is happy, once the problems are solved. But peace isn't a reward. It's not what comes after the work. It's what allows us to do the work well. The truth is, if you don't protect your peace, the world will chip away at it without even realizing it. People don't always mean to steal your energy, but they will. The problems become yours. Their expectations become your burdens.